Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joe Papano from FiberLink Communications. Hopefully you can all hear. We're glad you could take time to join us today. It's been a couple weeks since I've been able to host a webinar, so I'm glad to be back, and also glad to have Val Hetrick presenting today. Val's our Director of Customer Engineering. Hi, Val.
Hi, Joe.
And the topic today is to provide information about the best practices for implementing a bring your own device policy, or a program. And so, certainly for us here at FiberLink, this is one of the key use cases or key benefits most of our customers and most of the companies that are trying MAS 360 ask for. So this is something that they want to understand how to do, and obviously it's something MAS 360 can help companies achieve, and so that's kind of the topic today. As usual, we're going to do a few polling questions. I think we've got 4 today during the webinar, so John Harrington will be kind of sending those polls out during the webinar. I think John's also going to be sending out kind of instructions if you're having trouble hearing over your computer, how you can dial in. As always, we're going to ask if you can tweet about the webinar today. And I think John's going to be sending out some links to help with that as well. We're on a little bit of a tight schedule today because we are going to do a demo, which we haven't done in a while. And then we'll hopefully have a few minutes for some Q&A at the end. So thanks again for attending. Val, thanks for presenting. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. So as Joe mentioned, today we're going to discuss best practices to implementing a Bring Your Own Device program for your company. On the screen here, you can see that we outline 10 steps that will make your BYOD program successful. It probably looks like a lot, and it looks like it might be hard right now, but as we work through the slides, you will see that it's quite simple to follow and will end up serving as a guidebook for your internal processes.
So we're going to run our first poll right now, and it's kind of the most basic of questions. Does your organization have a bring your own device policy?
Great. So as we wait for those questions to come in, we did want to share some statistics that we captured in our previous webinars about bring your own devices. So what you're seeing on this slide is some data regarding companies that are currently supporting a BYOD program. As you can see, the majority have a program in place or are planning to do so in the next 6 to 12 months. And of those that have a program, you can see here that 72% are not reimbursing employees for their data usage cost. And you'll see where that becomes important a little bit later.
So I think hopefully you can all see the results of the poll. So it's a little bit different than the last time we asked this. So it's kind of almost split down the middle here. 45% either have a policy or are thinking about it, have something in progress, and 55% haven't started yet. Next question we're going to ask you is kind of that other one that Val just kind of went through, which is for those companies that do have a program, how are you reimbursing your employees for those expenses?
Great. And the next 2 slides we're going to show are actually based on some Forrester data. So the first one you're looking at, Forrester had surveyed end users in technology, and you can see that 70% of smartphones are being selected by the user, and 65% of tablet owners are selecting their own tablets. So a smaller group are actually selecting it from a list that the corporation is providing or that the corporation is servicing.
So that doesn't surprise me. I think that's kind of what we hear, right? More and more companies are giving employees a chance to choose the device they want to carry. So I think you can all see the results of the poll now, and you can see about a fifth of the companies are giving their employees a stipend to spend for their device. About a quarter let the employees submit an expense report, and the remainder don't do any reimbursement at all right now.
Which leads in nicely to our next slide, actually, another Forrester slide. So to support the statistic of the reimbursement, Forrester also collected this data from end users, and this shows that 70% of users are paying for their own devices. It's a little bit different from the tablet, only 58%, but still the majority are paying for their own devices.
That's pretty much what the polls kind of say.
Absolutely.
So third of, I think, 4 polling questions. and it's, again, a simple one. How are you managing employee-owned devices today?
So while we wait for that poll to conclude, there are a number of things to consider while you're creating a policy. So we're going to touch on point 1 here, which is creating a comprehensive bring your own device policy. Your policy should enforce your corporate standards, but also allow for flexibility of the employees to bring their personal devices. There's a number of things that you should consider. One is who should pay for the device and for the service plan. Do you implement a stipend as a carrot to get people to opt into your policy, or like some of our statistics are showing, make the user pay for everything? You also have the ability to offer a discount. Would you have an acceptable usage policy? The acceptable usage policy could be accepted as the user is enrolling their device into the service as a EULA, or you could also have a form or another method to allow the user to opt into your policy. You'll also need to decide which devices you'll support. You still have a fragmentation issue out there for Android, and the device selection may lie heavily on some of your security and regulation requirements. So speaking of that, which would you enforce? Are you looking to enforce a passcode on the devices? Make sure the device can be encrypted? It may rule out some of the models of devices you look for in your BYOD program. Of our surveyed participants from some previous webinars, about 83% believe that ActiveSync alone is not an adequate method to support these devices, both from a policy and a management capability. So you will need to find and leverage an MDM solution to help you manage these devices. Some data from some of our other polls are indicating that Exchange isn't enough, as I mentioned. And just to share a couple pieces of data from Mass 360, we are seeing all devices in our system, of all of them, 22% are getting tagged as personally owned, and of those, 86% are iOS devices.
So we're going to just quickly go through the results of the last polling question, which was kind of basically how are you managing these employee-owned devices today. So not surprisingly, the majority of respondents, 43%, said through the the email system that they've got in place. So obviously that means Exchange ActiveSync most of the time. We do try to do about once a quarter a webinar on how to manage mobile devices through Exchange ActiveSync. It certainly can be done, and obviously most of you are using it today. So that doesn't surprise us at all. About a third aren't doing anything, and of course we would certainly want to see you do something rather than nothing there. So there, obviously for companies that have Exchange, it's relatively simple to manage the devices through ActiveSync. But obviously we'd prefer and recommend you get an MDM platform for doing all this. So we're going to go to our last polling question. I promise we won't bother you anymore with these during the webinar. And so question is this: what's your biggest concern with supporting Bring Your Own Device program at your company?
So we're going to kick into step 2 of our 10-step process here, which is measuring your mobile footprint. And it is very important to understand your existing mobile footprint when you're going after a BYOD program. You probably know roughly how many BlackBerries you're managing via your BlackBerry server, but if you have opened up ActiveSync in your environment, like the 45% of our surveyed participants have, chances are you don't know. One of the ActiveSync details are given to one user. They're generally handed off to other people, and then you have a flurry of devices coming in that you're not aware of. Mass 360 does have a tool to allow you to measure your mobile footprint and identify these devices in the system, and that is available for free on our website. As part of our MDM solution, you can also start blocking new devices from coming into your environment. Of the multiple customers I've spoken to over the past years here, our best practice that we tell customers is always to first identify the number of devices you already have connected, and then start blocking any new device from coming in. And then that will allow you to review your data and clean it up to get a good understanding of who needs to be managed. And that will give you ease of enrolling folks into your MDM solution. It's also amazing to me in terms of the customers we work with will give us numbers of how many devices they think they have, and either after they run a tool or install our cloud extender for our platform, they're amazed at the numbers that actually show up in the system.
So we're just going to kind of quickly recap the results of that last poll. You should all be able to see the results there. So not surprisingly, almost everyone's concerned about securing corporate data, and that makes perfect sense. But you can see after that, kind of it's really pretty evenly spread across things from, worried about needing additional help desk folks. And I think Val's going to hit on a couple of ways you can, you can leverage an MDM system to help you with that particular concern, as well as making sure that employees' information stays private. So I think that's another area Val's going to hit on in a few minutes. So pretty good response on that. Thanks.
Great. So we'll go ahead and jump into step 3 here, which is to simplify the enrollment process and configure the device over the air. So once you've used step 2 to identify the devices that you need to enroll into the solution, a simple enrollment process should be used to encourage users to opt into your BYOD program. The enrollment process should be simple and secure and should also configure the device at the same time. MDM providers do allow the user to receive an email or a text message with a short URL to start and complete the enrollment process. Some may or may not be required to install an agent to complete that enrollment process, and a lot of times that also depends on the device type. You should write up some instructions to provide to your existing users to identify the steps they need to become part of your BYOD program, since they likely enrolled to your ActiveSync server without you knowing. We also recommend that existing users delete their ActiveSync accounts from their phones so you can isolate and manage the corporate data on the devices. New devices would just start fresh and become part of the MDM solution, as well enroll to your ActiveSync environment. After the enrollment is completed, the device will be automatically configured with your security settings that you can define in your policy. Some of the common ones that our customers are pushing out are the ActiveSync account settings to the device, requiring some semblance of a passcode on the device, and setting various device restrictions, such as blocking YouTube or cameras or iCloud, for example. We do find that many customers just want to mimic their BlackBerry policy to keep based on what they have with their new devices. And then later that becomes an adjustment in terms of pushing out new items. Step 4 is talking about providing some self-service capabilities to your end users. And although this is not for everyone, self-service capabilities can be a big win for both the end user and your IT team. The end user would be able to log on to an end user portal and see a list of all of their devices. This would allow them to do simple everyday tasks like locking their device, resetting a forgotten password, locating a lost device, or even wiping it. The user can also leverage the end user portal to understand why they may be out of compliance as compared to your security policy. This, of course, takes some of these common tasks away from the IT team. Moving on to step 5 is to protect your personal information or protect your employee privacy. Personally identifiable information is information that can be used to identify, contact, or even locate a person. Some privacy laws prevent corporations from being allowed to collect or view this data. Another item to consider is the user's personal safety and privacy in the world today. PII could be exploited to plan criminal activities or even identify if a person is seeking help for a problem that they may not want the world to know about based on their applications they have installed. You need to understand what restrictions your business has and plan accordingly. You can then consult with your MDM provider to know if you can identify a device as a corporate device versus a personal device and apply a policy to hide some of that information.
Hey, Val?
Yes.
There was a question that came in while you were kind of speaking on that slide about in the self-service portal, is the wipe that's supported there a full device wipe or a selective wipe?
The wipe that's supported from an end-user perspective is today a full wipe. The IT staff would still be able to maintain a selective wipe or a removal of control to that device if for some reason the user wanted to opt out of your policy. And we will cover some of those items in terms of automated selective wipes as we continue here. All right, moving right into step 7. Is to isolate your corporate data. Corporations are concerned about the ability to isolate and manage corporate data on the devices. If you are going to support Bring Your Own Device program, you do need to be able to remove these settings that you push that will configure corporate data. such as email, wireless, VPN configurations, any apps that you may be pushing down, or any confidential documents. If we look at some of the data from MAS 360, you'll see that 86% of all wipes are done via selective wipe, and that's both a manual and an automated process.
I'll be honest with you, that surprised me when I saw that stat. I wasn't expecting that number to be that high.
Absolutely. Step 8 is to continuously monitor your automated actions and your policies. After the users enroll their devices, you do have to monitor the state of that device. You need to check for things if the device is still enrolled, if the device is still in compliance with your security policy, any new apps that the user may be installing that they shouldn't be. And then you need to make adjustments based on the data that you're seeing. From here, you can analyze this data and start understanding what additional policies or compliance rules you may need to create and apply to the devices. Compliance rules will allow you to take automated actions based on the state of the device. For an example, if the user enrolls and then later decides to jailbreak their device, the automated compliance rules can detect that, and then you can take an action on that device. The action could be as simple as a notification to the administrator or a full wipe of that device. When the user is back into compliance, the setting would automatically be restored, and anything that was removed would automatically be reapplied. It's important to also have a flexible solution where you can set up custom watch lists or device groups to track important data quickly. Another item to be aware of here is to monitor the industry trends and changes, as new device and upgrades are always hitting the market, and the users are upgrading faster than ever and are quick to adopt the new technology based on feature functionality.
So in that one poll we ran, I think that was kind of one of the issues we asked about. Were you concerned about just the pace of new devices hitting the market and you as the IT team being asked to support it? I understand the concern. I just don't know what anybody can do about it, right? Because we had that other kind of data where the majority of end users are picking their own device. So obviously, the devices they're going to pick are going to be based on what's on the market at that time, right?
Right. All right, step 9 is an optional step, but one to consider in terms of managing your data usage. If you are paying for the mobile data plan, you may want a way to track this data internally just to make sure that you're not going over your plans. If you're not paying for the service plans, you may want to help users help themselves by providing an easy way for them to track and be alerted on their current data usage. You can set items like roaming and in-network megabit limits and even customize the billing day. Based on that detail, you can set threshold notifications to warn the user when they reach or go over certain percentages. We also recommend as a best practice to educate your users on the benefits of using Wi-Fi when it is available. The last step is really to track your return on investment of your BYOD program. You can consider some of the following comparisons when looking at corporate-owned versus personal-owned devices. The device purchase cost, the cost of the data plans, and also the time and labor from your IT teams. The other item to consider is the productivity gains, as your employees will be connected all the time and be more inclined to do work. BYOD also often means the use of app-rich phones that can allow you to develop and manage apps for everyday tasks that the user may have within your corporation. So this will conclude our 10-step process on how you can make your BYOD program a success. I think you can see it's much simpler than you may have thought, and I'm going to take the next 10 to 15 minutes to show a demo of MAS 360 and our mobile device management platform to show you how we can help with some of these things and keep it fast and simple.
And I think there's been some questions coming in while you've been talking, and so I'll try to maybe steer you when you're kind of going through the portal just to things people have asked about.
Okay. Sounds good. So give me 1 second, folks, to share out my web browser with everyone here.
I can maybe tackle a couple of these while you're doing that, Val. So there was a question about can MAS 360 do a selective wipe, and the answer is yes. MAS 360 does support a selective wipe, and the main purpose for a selective wipe is to support personally owned devices. So when an employee should separate from a company, you can wipe just the corporate-related information from the device, leave all the personal information intact. So that's a big part of what selective wipe's about. So yes, we do support that.
And I would also just add on to that point briefly that what we're seeing from our side is the selective wipe is being done as part of automated actions, right? So if a user jailbreaks their phone, or if they remove control, or if they don't have a particular version, that selective wipe can be done automatically through the compliance rules. We also offer what's called remove control. So when you have a user that does come into you with to bring their own device, if they want to opt out or if they separate from the company, you can actually remove the entire control. And that does a selective wipe and then makes that device no longer managed. So this way the user is secure that, not only has your corporate data been removed from the device, but they're no longer able to be tracked or located in the portal. All right, well, you can literally start managing your mobile devices in MAS 360 in a few minutes. And what I've done here was set up a portal that's somewhat more specifically geared towards a bring your own device method. But in our watch list, you're seeing here that I've customized how many of my devices are personally owned. You can also track corporate-owned devices within the same portal. The watch list is meant to be that customized view for the IT administrator to know about the compliance in their environment. Here I can easily see how many people have reported in. I can see what devices have upgraded to iOS 5, devices that have data sharing software, and some other items that you'll see below there. The next item I wanted to pop into just quickly was our Cloud Extender device view. So I mentioned we had a free tool on our website that will allow you to identify all of the devices that may be associated to your ActiveSync environment. But we also have our MAS 360 Cloud Extender, which allows you to pull that data into MAS 360 and manipulate it even further. And the numbers here aren't astounding because this is a small environment, but here I can see quickly the number of mailboxes that I have, how many devices are synced to those mailboxes, mailboxes that have more than one device, and devices that are reported prior to the last 30 days. So this is that information that you can get on a summary level basis to identify very quickly the number of devices associated in your environment and then start cleaning things up.
And so I think, folks on the webinar who are Exchange administrators, you probably recognize that to get that same data out of your Exchange interface, you would have been writing some PowerShell to get that. So it's kind of a nice tool.
Absolutely. And then the second item that I wanted to highlight for you here was our auto quarantine process. So I mentioned earlier that after you identify all of your devices, you may want to set up a block to those devices for any new device that's coming in. So here we have the concept of auto quarantine, which would allow you to set these parameters to be notified when anybody new did try to ActiveSync their device. And what's nice about this is it does quarantine them, so they're not able to get their mail until you go in and approve or block that device. A new thing that we just added into the portal was an option to auto-approve enrolled devices. So this would assume that you've sent an enrollment request down to the user, and since that enrollment request has a policy to set up their mail, they'll be automatically approved into the system. So this would still give you the peace of mind that people trying to ActiveSync directly without being enrolled and managed properly would still be blocked. All right, well, the next thing I wanted to just touch on here was our enrollment workflow. And if we go to Manage Enrollment Request, we can see that we can send individual enrollment requests to users. And the reason I wanted to highlight this was twofold. One, we just revamped the form a little bit. And the second is we've made it clear for you to set the corporate employee or provide later option in terms of the device that is getting enrolled. You also have the ability to select a policy set, a compliance rule set, or a monthly data plan for that user. And I'll just send a test one here to show you how this works. But this is the enrollment that would go down to the end user and let them start their enrollment process. So here I can say I want an iOS policy. I'm going to select my personally owned device rule and my Carrier Y plan, and I'll hit Send Request. This is what the end user will see and the URL that they would end up going to start that simplified enrollment process. Once done, you'll be able to see here that that device is fully enrolled. We also allow you to bulk import that data, so if you did have, a couple hundred or 1,000 people you needed to enroll into the service, you can do that with a bulk file. I'm going to go ahead and click on my iPhone here to show you a couple other pieces. This is our device view, and this is pretty consistent over a number of devices. I'm just going to focus on my iPhone for the time being. But here you can see the various security and compliance detail. So here my device is not jailbroken. I can easily see my hardware encryption and my compliance state and look at the rules that are configured. If I pop into the Hardware Inventory tab, you'll see that I'm able to determine my ownership. And in this instance, I was employee-owned. One of the other neat things that I wanted to kind of cover off with you here was some of our PII, or our employee privacy. So here I've created myself a plan that prevents the ability to collect the location from the device. So you'll see here, as an administrator, I'm not able to track where this person is. I cannot see their location history, nor can I see the last time that they were at a particular location. The same holds true for software installed. And what's interesting about this feature is it does tell you that privacy settings are enabled here, but you can see two applications. And these are the applications that I push down using the MAS 360 platform. So any application you would deploy from MAS 360, you can still track, since that is considered more of a corporate-owned device, or corporate-owned application, I would say. And you can block the rest of the inventory, so you can't see anything specific about applications on my phone. Just to highlight quickly some of the actions, my last known location option is here, but since my privacy settings are enabled, that request has been denied. And as Joe was indicating, we do have the selective wipe capability where you could go and restrict the device, or we have the remove iOS control, which does the selective wipe and then also removes management from that device. You'll see also some of the items that the end users can perform here. And we also tie in the ActiveSync action. So if I wanted for some reason to stop email from flowing to this device, I could simply click the Block Device button, and that would prevent any new mail from getting to that device. So the next thing I wanted to show you was one of our policies here, and I'm going to just go into the iOS policy. And if I click in here, I do want to show you some of the common items that our customers are setting. If I click the Edit button, this simply opens up the Configure Passcode policy. So here you can enforce a passcode on your mobile device. If I wanted to, I could require an alphanumeric character in my passcode, set my minimum lengths, passcode ages, grace periods, or number of failed passcode attempts. Diving into some of the device restrictions, here you are able to set all of the device functionality on the phone. One of the more popular ones that Apple added was the ability to block Siri, and also now the ability to block Siri when the phone is locked itself. We also support all of the iCloud block capabilities, and then if you did have, if you were part of an education format that were giving iOS devices out to children in schools, you can also block some of the region ratings. So if I wanted to not allow, specific types of movies, I could go ahead and do that. Here, you're able to configure some application compliance. You can also do things like push wireless, VPN, and ActiveSync settings. And the ActiveSync settings is probably one of the more common ones that our companies are using. And this allows you to set your account name for your ActiveSync mailbox, as well as your server, and specific information about that. We do also support the use of device-based certificates to push down to the users so they don't have to use a password authentication. I next just want to jump into some of the common Android policies. And here you're seeing a very similar layout, but I do have the ability to configure a device passcode. And here I could do a pattern, or I could do numeric or alphabetic or whatever I wanted to do here. We also have the ability to control some security settings. So if you do have a device that actually allows for encryption on it, you can enforce that device encryption with MAS 360. In terms of your device restrictions, you can do things like shut off the camera or USB. You can also force the GPS to be on if you want those devices to be located, or you can shut it off altogether. We also support the application compliance within Android, and recently we added the ability to be able to support native app compliance. So if you didn't want the user to be able to access Gmail or other email outside of what you've configured, you can go ahead and uncheck some of these options. Wireless and VPN settings still are applicable here. And one thing I wanted to call out with Exchange ActiveSync is our configuration in terms of how we deal with that. On Android, since there are so many various email agents out there, we do allow you to set mail up or prompt the user to set mail up as you enroll. And we also support the integration and deployment of Touchdown. We do not sell Touchdown, but we are partnered with NitroDesk. Touchdown is somewhat of a popular email application for folks that want their users to have a consistent user experience. And it also allows you to do additional things like encrypt the emails or encrypt the attachments and disable certain types of information on that phone, so you can't copy and paste email or contacts elsewhere. We've added the ability for you to configure a web shortcut, and then there's also some minimal device management information here. So you can give a message to the user if they try to remove control, or if they don't set a particular setting that you require in the policy. And this could be anything from a selective wipe to a lock to a nothing or to a wipe. And if you select lock, you can set an administratively known password that would automatically be applied on that phone, which would prevent the user from getting back into it. The next thing I do want to just touch on briefly is our mobile expense management for our data plans. And what you can do here is set up various plan names. And here I have two personal plans, Carrier X and Carrier Y. And I also have our corporate data plan here. If I click into one of these, I can set my first day of the billing cycle, and I can set my in-network mobile data usage limit as well as my roaming mobile data usage limit. You'll see where this comes to play when we look at the compliance rules in a few moments. We'll just go there now, actually. You can also create multiple compliance rules, and here I have a corporate one and a personally owned one since I am managing both types of devices. Here you can select some basic items in terms of the OSs you want to enforce compliance on. You can set up event notifications, and then that moves us into some of the enforcement rules. So as an example, I set up here that if the user decided to opt out of our policy, we could send an immediate block with a message. Some other items you can enforce with compliance rules are minimum operating system version, if remote wipe is supported, if the device is capable of doing encryption and if that encryption is enabled, your application compliance, jailbroken and rooted devices, and then based on what action you may take, you can also restrict corporate resources from your blocked devices. Getting into some of the monitoring rules are more alerts, and you'll see here that I'm monitoring roaming changes, and I'm alerting my user when they have entered a roaming state. And then the last part of the expense monitoring allows you to set these thresholds that I spoke about earlier, where you can monitor and notify the users or administrators when they reach certain thresholds or exceed certain thresholds. So here I have a first warning configured at 50%, a second at 70, and a third at 100. And all of those messages are customizable depending on what you want to convey. The last item I wanted to touch on were our privacy settings. And within the privacy settings, you can restrict two things, first being the location information, and this would include things like your physical address, your geographical coordinates, your history, your IP address, and your SSID. And you can also restrict the app inventory, as we spoke about earlier. Here you can do that on personal or corporate-owned devices, and then you're also able to select the applicable device type that you want to apply that on. We also have a change history that allows you to detail who might have made changes to those actions. And the audit history actually shows up across the board. One last thing I wanted to jump in was just some of our reporting, and since there's not a ton of data in the system, some of the reports won't look that great, but what we've been talking about now, up till now, has been our individual device views and our kind of our policy configuration and management, and now these are more of the reports. So here you can see which devices are corporate versus personally owned, what types of devices you have. If you're integrated with your Exchange or Traveler environments, you can see different approval states and policies. And you can drive down into each one of those individual items to see the various pieces. I'm still sharing. So with that was essentially what I wanted to cover off today from the demo perspective.
So I know I didn't see the slides or the graphs, Val, which is okay. So I think the webinar is a little bit slow in refreshing screens. There's certainly been a number of questions coming in around selective wipe. So I think what we ought to do is maybe just spend 1 or 2 minutes talking about what the difference is between a selective wipe and a full wipe, and hopefully that will clear things up for people. So obviously the goal of a selective wipe, and the reason selective wipes exist, is to allow companies to wipe the corporate information or corporate resources the device has access to, but leave everything else intact on the device. And so the use case is absolutely for when an employee who's using a personally owned device to access corporate resources leaves the company, or that device should no longer have access to corporate resources. And so in MAS 360's case, it works this way. MAS can push a number of what we would call profiles down to a device. One profile would give access to corporate email, one would give access to corporate Wi-Fi, another might give access to corporate VPN, and then of course you can also push applications and content down to these devices. When you perform a selective wipe on a device in MAS 360, all 5 of those things are removed from the device. Everything else is left on the device. So any personal photos, any music, TV shows, anything else, email accounts that are accessing personal email, all of those particular things are left intact, but all the corporate things are removed. So that's kind of the idea behind it and how it works. So hopefully that is what people were looking for, because there were a lot of questions about that. Another question, do you need to install something in front of the Exchange server to stop access via ActiveSync?
So yes, we do have a small piece of software that you would install on one of your existing servers in your environment, so we don't necessarily require an appliance or a separate environment to be set up. That small piece of software is called the Cloud Extender, and the Cloud Extender allows you to do a number of integration points, one against your Exchange or Lotus Traveler environment, but we can also leverage your corporate Active Directory or LDAP global catalogs to be able to pull user information as well. The other integration points are around a BlackBerry Enterprise server, certificate integration, and over-the-air authentication for your devices.
Yeah, and just to be clear, certainly there's other MDM platforms out there where there's a box that sits in front of your Exchange server, and one of the things that's happening is all of your corporate emails going through that particular server. In the case of MAS 360, and I think this is very important with a cloud-based service, your company's email never goes through any part of MAS 360. So our Cloud Extender is merely talking to your Exchange server and configuring, for example, in Exchange 2010, configuring the ABQ functionality that's in Exchange 2010 already. But what I think is important to know is that that data of yours, that email, never ever goes through MAS 360 in any way. So there's a couple of questions about managing laptops. So you can manage laptops through MAS 360. Now I will tell you that the management paradigm is a little bit different. So it's kind of funny, people really like this idea, with smartphones and tablets of, well, I just want to wipe the thing, or I want to lock the thing. And of course, it's not quite so easy to accomplish that same thing in the laptop world. So, the answer is yes, you can manage devices, specifically Windows and Mac laptops through MAS 360, but you can't do simply things like a wipe. There is no support for something like a wipe like there is on a mobile device. But we can keep the devices patched, we can report on all the hardware and software inventory related to the device, and we can lock down and enforce policy on the device to ensure that security apps that you want as part of your policy to be running are running at all times, and also do network access control and network restrict functionality if you want compliance checking done before you let a laptop connect into your corporate network.
And if you are able to see my screen here, we're also able to enable that for you just under your existing trial. So if that's something you wanted to look at, we do have the ability for you to enable those services right from here, which would allow you to download and install that agent on your laptop, desktop, or Mac.
So Val, I think you may have hit this, so this question may be, I may be a little bit late on this, but I think you demoed it, setting the privacy settings.
That's correct. And I can go into that one more time for you, just in case my screen wasn't refreshing. But here is where you're able to restrict the location information as well as the app inventory information. And you can do that on a corporate or personal owned or both or neither aspect here.
There were a number of folks asking about Lotus Notes support. We do support, our Cloud Extender can integrate with Notes Traveler environments. I forget what the exact version is, 7.5 and later of Notes? I forget what the exact version number is.
Yeah, it's essentially the later versions of the Lotus Traveler environment where they allowed for Android and some of the Win devices to come across. So I think it's 8.5.2. Okay,
fantastic. Val, why don't we do this? Folks, if you have questions, we've got a couple more minutes. Feel free to shoot those in, and then we've got a couple more slides where we'll do some housekeeping. Val and I can try to tackle those if you shoot them in. Again, John's going to be pushing out a link here if you'd like to tweet about the webinar today, or you'd like to interact with us, ask a question, whatnot. Feel free to do that via Twitter. John will push that link out. One thing we did want to highlight for you is that Mobile World Congress was a few weeks ago in Barcelona, and obviously it's one of the bigger trade shows in the mobility industry. And one thing, in case you weren't aware of it, MAS 360 won the award as the best enterprise mobile service at the show. So we were certainly happy to be in good company because Apple, Samsung, and Google were also winners in their categories. And, frankly, the MDM marketplace is pretty competitive, and we've got some very good competitors that we compete against every day in it. So we were quite happy to have been selected as the best service. So I want to thank anyone who was familiar with that. And kind of last but not least, as you know, we do these webinars every 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, we're going to have Frank Schlondorn, who's our QA director, talk about the 10 mysteries of Android. And believe me, if there's anyone who knows what the top 10 mysteries of Android are, it would be Frank Schlondorn. So even I'm kind of interested in seeing what he has to say here. So this should be a good webinar, and obviously we see lots and lots of interest in Android adoption. So if you want to join, please sign up for that. I think you'll be getting a link with a link to the registration right now. As most of you should probably know by now, we record all the webinars. This webinar will be posted tomorrow at the Master Center. You'll be getting an email in a few minutes with a link to it. I know some folks are also asking during the webinar, can you point me at any policy templates I could use for a BYOD program? There are some that I know of that are out there. So we'll try to post a link to those as well with the webinar recording tomorrow, so that could help you out a lot. Obviously, please feel free to go to the Master Center and look through all the content. There's a whole how-to library about how to do this, that, or the other thing with MAS 360. There's all of our old webinars, plus all kinds of other articles that the community of people that go to the Master Center have contributed. If you've got ideas for webinars, we'd love to hear about it. So you've got my contact info up there. You've got Val's contact info up there. Please feel free to shoot us any comments or questions or ideas you've got for how we could make the webinar series better. We'd certainly appreciate the feedback. So with that, I'm going to sign off. I wanted to thank everyone for their attendance. Val, thanks again.
No problem.
Thank you. For presenting. John, thanks for your help.
No problem.
We'll see you all again in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.